Ever feel like you're doing this teaching thing alone? You don't have to be. Shared teaching is all about sharing the workload through the power of collaboration and teamwork. Together, we'll walk through all the difficult parts of teaching and learn how to streamline our processes, fine-tune our time management, and develop a more manageable workload. If that sounds like a dream come true to you, then welcome to the Shared Teaching Podcast. Let's share in the teaching to make those dreams a reality. Now here's today's Shared Teaching. Hello and welcome back to the Shared Teaching Podcast. I'm your host, Susan, and you are listening to another episode of Writing Tip Wednesday. This is my 6th episode in my new summer series, and today we're going to talk about modeling your story. So my tip is that you need to know how to model your own story, especially when you're teaching personal narratives. And I would like you to start teaching personal narratives when you are teaching your writing units in the classroom. It's the perfect one to start out with because students are more intuitive with personal narrative. So modeling your story is all about figuring out what you're going to say beforehand before you're in front of the classroom with the students. And you want to make it a story that they can kind of relate to, a story that will make them think of their own things. So some things that I've modeled in the past for personal narratives are, there was a time when I was a very young little girl and I was hanging out with a neighborhood boy, and he dared me to put my thumb in a knot hole on my parents' porch. Excuse that extra noise. Apparently my dog is playing with something in the corner. So I put my thumb in that knot hole, and then when I pulled it out, my entire thumbnail ripped right off because, of course, it went even easier than it did coming out. So it was this huge bloody disaster. So I talked about a time I got hurt. And so I modeled that for my students. I went through this story, and I did a beginning, middle, and end picture, and then I wrote my story according to the beginning, middle, and end pictures. Something else I talked about was a time when I was shopping with my daughter in the store, and this happens to a lot of our students too. I turned around and she was nowhere to be found, and I did find her eventually. She was hiding inside the clothing racks, but that is something that happens with a lot of kids. It's relatable. They can be like, oh yeah, I got hurt one time too. Look at my knee, right? I fell down, I got hurt. Or, oh yeah, I got lost too. I looked around and I couldn't find my mom or my dad at the grocery store, right? Like they all have a relatable story similar to that. So you want to pick something that's a very small, short personal narrative moment and just talk about that moment and then make sure they know the beginning, middle, and end of it as you are modeling it. So I like to do that with pictures first and then the words. Thank you so much for listening to this short but sweet writing tip episode. Stay tuned next week for an all-new writing tip and on Friday for an all-new regular episode of the Shared Teaching Podcast. Bye for now. If you've loved this show, then join me in sharing the teaching,
hitting that subscribe button,
and leaving us a review on
iTunes
so we can be found by more teachers like you who are ready to start sharing the workload. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Find new episodes each week on sharedteaching.com. Thanks for listening to the Shared Teaching Podcast.